Okay, hello. Can everyone see my shared screen? Yes? Awesome. Awesome. I'm excited. So I hope everyone's excited for a nice, fun session tonight. On what night is it? Wednesday. So welcome to the treasurer section. Let me introduce ourselves. So my name is Tim Weigel. I am the Southern Bluegrass Regional Director. And Nikolai, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Nikolai. I am with Eastern Great Lakes. I am the Regional Manager of Finance. And I've been with Alpha Kappa Psi for over 10 years as a brother member and now as a volunteer.
We'll just leave how long I've been involved off the table because I don't want to feel old tonight. So, all right. So we'll jump into it now. Just to mention, if any of you have questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. We do have people monitoring that, paying attention to it, and we will answer all questions that you have. We like to try to be as interactive as possible. So it should be fun. And then also we have from staff, we have Brian on here, as well as Dina, which many of you might have met Dina, but she's here. Hi, Dina.
Hi, everyone. Dina Gospel from the Heritage Center, Indianapolis. Nice to be here with everyone. Good evening.
Put a face to all those helpful emails that you get. So, all right. So let's start. And I'll go ahead and take the first slide. So we have billing, and basically what goes into the billing. So you have your dues and insurance. It's billed in the fall, dues on the 15th of October and February. So that's when they're due. $60 per collegiate member, and it's based off your chapter spot roster. Also meaning, make sure your roster is correct. There's many chapters that don't have a correct roster and find out about it years later, and you're being overbilled. And at the end of the day, we don't know you're being overbilled because we can only go off the records you have. So make sure those are correct. Make status changes by November 1st or March 1st so you get the correct credits on there. As far as $30 per member based on March 1st for collegiate roster and spring initiates. That is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian or Dina, insurance, correct?
It's the insurance billing is based on your March 1st collegiate roster and your spring initiates. That is correct.
Okay.
Liability insurance. And I'm going to put some notes, the changes we've made that in the chat. So because some of these things are going to be a little bit different due to COVID.
Okay. COVID, it's the gift that keeps giving on changes across the country. And it's used as a chapter average. So with insurance, I know we get a lot of questions. How's it calculated? And it's tough because it's billed yearly. So they base it kind of off the spring roster, and it's based off the chapter averages, because at the end of the day, there's no way to give an exact billing on insurance, and insurance is just there to protect us. So make sure to collaborate with chapter officers to ensure the roster is up to date to avoid extra charges. Very, very important. Okay, convention savings plan. So that is to help save for conventions so that you can at least make sure to cover the cost for your delegate and your alternate delegate, which is required to attend conventions based off our what you call board of directors statement of policy. That's $350 per chapter starting this fall. And then pledge fees, they're $48 per pledges based on chapter spot reporting. So again, it's all about the reporting on there. And then just to do the update. So, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, the pledge fees stay the same at $48?
Yes, right. The pledge fee will remain the same this year, $48.
Okay. Okay. And then it's the $84 is basically with the reduction on there, right? So that's combined with the insurance and the dues.
No, the $84. So when the pledge fee is $48, and then the initiate fee when you report your initiates is $84. So those two fees remain the same for this year.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, same, pledges must be dropped within 10 days of induction to receive credit for the pledge fees. Um, Initiate fees are $84 per initiate based on chapter spot reporting, and then do not report pledges or initiates without collecting the fees first. So when you are initiating them, you should have the fees being paid. It's kind of like if you forget to collect it and then you report them, they might not pay, therefore you can end up in the rears, have money due, and who's to say you'll ever be able to collect them. So a lot of stuff going on with VP of Finance. It's all about staying on top of the reporting. Keep track of your records and make sure it's paid on time, and then you'll never have a past due balance. Ways to pay: you go online with member payment. You can call in by phone. They love to take payments over the phone, or you can also mail a check to the Heritage Center, and there is their address. And then Brian also put in the chat, if you haven't seen it, no finance charges are being charged for late payments through November, so that you allow the chapter members to set up payment plans with their chapters to pay over the term. Any questions from the group so far on this? No? Awesome. All right. Nikolai, all you.
Thank you. So the next slide would be the communication to officers. Even though this is for finances, and we would think that the chapter treasurer or the chapter VP of finance is usually the only person that gets communication to, that is actually not the case. It depends on how you have your chapter spot set up. All the financial documents are sent to the 7 core officers on chapter spot, and also your chapter advisor that is set up in chapter spot. So if you don't have your chapter spot updated to your most current chapter officers, please do that at least for this fall. So that way, any financial documents get sent out to the appropriate individuals. And some of the most common chapter information for finance documents is you have the chapter statements, which is just an overview of all the activity that your chapter has had with the Heritage Center. So we're going to list out a couple items, and it would list all of them on your chapter statement. So normally you'll get an invoice billed to your chapter, and that's pretty much either, as Tim mentioned, would be your dues, would be your insurance, be it your convention. It usually individually broken out, each invoice per whatever it is covering. So if it's dues, you'll get a specific invoice for dues and whatnot. Then you have the credit memo. So credit memo usually comes in if, for example, your roster wasn't correct on chapter spot, and you were billed at the initial amount of that you had on your chapter spot, but then you went back and either graduated some students or suspended some students, student members. And what happens is instead of just paying the difference, you get credited that amount from the initial invoice. So, and that makes up the difference between the two. And that's usually applied to the invoice. So if it's like for student members, the credit would be applicable to student members. And there are sometimes some invoices or some credits that are, if you paid, for example, the entire amount and you made an additional payment, and that usually gets applied to the most oldest outstanding invoice, because there's not an offset for the credit memo to be applied to the invoice. And the last financial document that you would normally receive as a chapter is the payment receipt. So it's an acknowledgement that Heritage Center has received a payment from your chapter and has credited your accounts. So this is pretty much all the financial documents The biggest thing not to confuse is that your chapter statement is not an invoice. It usually breaks down, as I mentioned, all of your invoices, credits, and any payments. So just keep an eye for that. And I believe those get sent at least once, twice a semester. So that way you are aware of what you have, the current balance with Heritage Center. Any questions? Or I see Brian answering a bunch of questions in the chat. Do we need to address any of them, Brian?
Well, the one I definitely want to point out, at least that I saw in there, was so the convention savings plan is 250. It was supposed to be 350, but we obviously are changing because we're trying to look at everything for our ever-changing COVID. And then also, it looks like there's going to be a 10% possible reduction, but that's still being looked into. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah, so the pledge fees and the initiate fees will stay the same, and then we are looking at a around a 10% reduction in student member dues, as well as on the insurance. So roughly 54 and 27.
Okay. So those looks like the only two biggest comments that were in there. It looked like I see from fees that were a little different than some of the slides.
Yeah, we apologize. These decisions are just like everything else with COVID. These decisions have been made, even some just 10 minutes before we started the call. So
it's a very fluid situation.
If I could just add one quick note that the chapters will receive a monthly statement which will outline all the activity throughout each month. So you'll receive that chapter statement every month, and that will go over and show all the invoices, credit memos, and payments. So just want to make sure that there's a clarification there. And a lot of chapters make it a little confused when they receive that monthly statement that is not an invoice. So that will show the balance if there is one, and sometimes they'll have a credit balance. So there's a little confusion there. So just make sure to read through that very carefully, that it's just an activity statement and not an actual invoice.
Okay. Awesome. We'll go ahead and move to the next slide. Again, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat because we're definitely monitoring it the entire time. Yeah. All right. So creating a chapter budget. So in budgeting, study your chapter's previous spending trends and calculate an average for each category. So it's very important to look at what you spent in the past and try to mirror that or decide based off what you know what's going to happen in the future of if you should increase or decrease those spendings. Estimates should come from the respective officers. So, you have different officers that might have certain programs or things events that they're putting on. They should be able to give a good idea of what their budget should look like for those events. Estimates should be realistic. So don't throw up some high number when you know you only need half that, and don't undercut your budget either because you want it to be realistic. The budget is a guideline to get you to the end so that you're fiscally responsible. And the budget should never project a loss. So never want to project a loss. Always look at it. You want to basically be a zero-based budget on that. So consider the inflows and outflows. So some of the inflows that you might have for your chapter dues, pledge fees, initiation fees, fines and penalties, fundraising, grants or school funding that you might receive from your specific university. Some of the outflows, fees and dues, insurance, convention savings plan, chapter events, pledge education, bank fees, officer training, fraternity events, transportation, registration, lodging and food for some of the events you might travel to. And these are just some of the basic stuff that you might have in there for your inflows and outflows. If it's not on here, doesn't mean it can't be on here. There's really no right or wrong thing that be in the budget. It's your chapter's budget. So just make it so that it helps your chapter be fiscally responsible. You don't want that negative balance in there. Make sure you're paying off your dues and everything like that, so that you're not on any bad reports showing that you are past due. The budget will help you stay on line with that. Any questions on the budget? No? There was a question there. Okay. Moving on to the next one.
That would be continuation of budgeting. So with this one, as Tim mentioned, budgeting is very important. You want to consider that live chapters tend to do it only semesterly, but you want to do entire year. That way you could see all your inflows and outflows from the fall semester into the spring semester. So the first bullet really addresses that it has to be a year-long budget that you have to create. From being in a advisor role to a couple of our chapters in our region, that's sometimes a tough situation to try to go beyond just the one semester planning. But definitely you want to do that, so that way you could see at the end of the year how much you have, and if you're still solvent and able to pay any of your bills, be it to the Heritage Center or be it for any of your other events. And part of the year-long budget that is actually supposed to be attached to your chapter success plan, which I believe we're already due for this upcoming year. So if you haven't submitted your chapter success plan, please try to regroup with your executive board and review and make sure that that's completed, and the year-long budget is also part of that submission. The other thing with the budget, and this is normally comes from a finance individual, so your vice president of finance or treasurer, what you want to do is at your chapter meetings, you want to inform your chapter of what your financial standing is, how much you brought in, how much you are expected to pay out. And that's pretty much just keeping the whole brotherhood honest and informed of what your financial solvency is. And that kind of creates an open communication there also. If you want to do any kind of event planning, it allows you to evaluate those options. You want to make sure you track your expenses and reconcile them to your budget. So usually this is part of the real world out there. Any expenses that occur, you always want to make sure that you're hitting a budget line item. You don't want to accidentally, create another event that you didn't budget for, and then at the end of the year, you could be in the negative hundreds or thousands, and you don't want your chapter to ever be in a negative amounts. So the pre-last bullet where it says variances should be explained, that's going back to the treasurer role, just explaining to the chapter where your money is going, how you're spending it. From personal experience, when I was a student member, we sometimes had difficulties providing, during our meetings of the financial standings, but it's really important that you do that, and all your brotherhood is informed of where the variances are from your budget that you spent or money that you brought in. And the last bullet is keeping your officers accountable. So this is really dependent on each chapter, and it's not a cookie cutter approach, because we have some chapters that have 10, 15 members, and then we have some chapters that are over 200. So financial situations definitely vary from chapter to chapter and from region to region. So if you have a bigger chapter and you have multiple committees and they all get assigned different line items or different amounts of the budget, you want to hold those committee member chairs accountable for their overspending or underspending. Most of it is overspending of any budgeted amount that they were provided. So that way they can keep on track, that don't overspend their line item and then potentially impact another committee chair or another planned event. So you want to make sure you keep your officers accountable for any money that's going out. Any questions?
Turn on mute. Any questions? All right, thank you, sir. Next up, fundraising. So this one's always a fun one. So a lot of times when you're looking at your budget or you're planning your chapter expenses, it's all about having the brothers pay. But there's also the second part of it where you can raise money, through different fundraising events. So some characteristics of a good fundraising campaign is the organization raising funds in a respectful way. Hard money is raised. Money can be spent on what you want rather than what the donor wants. So whenever you're raising money, there's certain organizations that you might set up with, like I know in certain places in Nashville, in one of my regions, certain of those companies will dictate that the money needs to go to, say, their foundation or their scholarship funds. So raising money, like say with car wash or a bake sale, you get the money and you can put it wherever you want. Another thing for a good fundraising campaign is avoid fronting money as much as possible. There's certain cases where you might have to, but there's certain things that you could sign up for that you could be able to spend money and not have to, or raise money without having to spend any money. You want to make sure that it's little financial risk. Supplies and services are donated as much as possible. As an organization, if you ask people to help support you, a lot of times some local businesses will. All it takes is an ask. Incentives are built in for donors or fundraisers. So that's always a good way to do some positive reinforcement to help gain support. Money comes in over time, not in one lump sum. So what that's kind of saying is like there's certain ways you can get it where it becomes residual income and it just keeps flowing in to it. Some ways that could be is like if you set up like a sponsorship program and you can have different contributions coming in so that you can understand how much money you're going to raise instead of every semester wondering, will we hit our fundraising goal? Publicity for the organization is also built in. So whenever you're doing a fundraising event, it's good to kind of build in the publicity for it. Like say, for example, you might do a golf tournament. So it builds excitement for your organization. You can do stuff, if you have Top Golf in your area, they actually do some fundraising events too, which is kind of cool and you can build stuff in there. But the real thing is whatever fundraising you do, you want to plan it to make it repeatable and successful. So, because the easier it is, the more repeatable it is. It's like every semester you can build in, we can add $10,000 into our budget because we know we're going to make at least that off our fundraising. Like I know there's some organizations, attorney that has amazing sponsorship packages, and they can pretty much tell how much money they're going to make off sponsorships. There's other organizations that partner with local businesses that can also do the same. And yes, Shania, if I'm saying that correctly, yes, you can share something.
Yes, I was going to say, well, now I am in the CFO position, but before I was a CFO, I was the chair of the fundraising committee. And I was going to say that is something that I had to realize, that it just doesn't come in one lump, like sum of money. You have to continuously do things. And I was going to say, well, like one way that we got a lot of money, like each semester, was we volunteered for the concession stands at MTSU. So like that was one event, that we knew every year working the football games, we were going to get a lot of money. But other events, I try to be very creative. But once you change your event so many times, or you try to come up with so many different things, it's like you take a risk because you honestly don't know, how people are going to react, or people will, come out and do this or that. But this semester, I feel like something that a lot of chapters could try to do is maybe like sell like masks, like for the brothers of our organization. I'm in another organization. I'm an Alpha Kappa Alpha, but she makes masks in like a way that the brothers could contribute to fundraising for our own organization, is if they wanted to purchase a mask, or even if we were to just give out little care packages or something like that. But I just wanted to share that I really did learn that lesson. Because I used to get frustrated, if we'll have an event and, like we don't raise nothing but $50, but we're going to take that $50 and we're going to do something with it, but we always wanted more money.
Yeah, no, that's good. And actually, the mask idea is a good way to adjust fundraising in this current time. And you can even do it like school colors, something that relates to your school. Guarantee it'll sell out. And then, depending where your school is located, if you were to actually do it, you can come up with the school colors. And if you have multiple universities in your area, which being that you guys are very close to Nashville, I know for a fact you do, sell it to those schools too. Reach out to the other organizations and see if they want to themed one like that based off their colors or something like that. So, but yeah, that's a good idea. Another good idea for fundraising that you might want to even look at is see if you have local chambers of commerce in your area. They're always trying to raise money, and they always try to raise money for nonprofits as well. Maybe reach out to them, see if you can help them work some of the events that they might do, and you never know. I know a local chamber of commerce here just did a virtual event in my area, and they raised $3,000, and that was with 3 people working it. So, and those 3 people are retired. Imagine having a couple of brothers being able to help them out, and then maybe they can donate something like, say, for example, for you guys, knowing that you have a scholarship fund set up through the foundation, they would love to donate to anyone's scholarship fund too, or 501c3s. So, just some thoughts on that. But
I would like to input or add this year with the COVID situation, and as I'm a Big Ten alum, and they just canceled the Big Ten football season. For the chapters that count on concession fundraising, which is great, and you make a lot of money, this year may be a little bit different in terms of that. So make sure that you are communicating with those your partners in that arena to make sure that that they are still planning to have volunteer groups come in to sell concessions and plan for the possibility, because we've seen a lot of things this year that I never thought possible, with canceling the NCAA tournament and now the Big Ten football season. That may not be possible this year just because of the situation we're in. So just make sure you're planning for alternatives and communicating with those partners.
yeah, definitely, because there's a lot of universities that partner with that, or like I know universities that partner with NASCAR for their races, but because they're not going to get the same type of traffic they normally would, they're not going to be available to make the money they usually would off of concessions either. So definitely outside the box thinking and seeing if there's any events that you can raise some money virtually, and partnering, I think, with a lot of local businesses like the chambers or either other nonprofits in the area, like 501c3s in your area, could be a way to help raise some money and possibly even make some money for some of those charities too. So, anyone else have any comments on fundraising?
I was also thinking, well, we had an e-board meeting on Sunday, and I was thinking about homecoming. So if any like chapters that, their homecoming is like really big, I had mentioned that we could maybe throw like a virtual like homecoming get together and people just get on there. I don't know what way we could like raise money somehow, but I just feel like a lot of students, it's their last year of school. Even if we had like a virtual party where everybody's on Zoom, where we have like a DJ, or it's open to the whole university, and maybe we were saying maybe like $2 to $3 like to get in because it'll be a DJ, but then it's like, who wants to pay for a DJ? But you got to think people will pay to get in parties and events. So like, it was just a whole thing that we discussed, but I don't know how other chapters on here maybe their homecoming is, but I just wanted to share that homecoming, everybody's going to miss, celebrating, partying, having a good time. Maybe there's something else that people could play upon, like to raise money.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to figure out how to do the pricing of that and move homecoming virtual, but other ways that you can also do it is, what if you were to do an online virtual silent auction? See if you can get businesses to donate baskets, and then you can partner with a local charity and possibly donate part of the money back, and then keep part of the proceeds as well. And And because it being virtual, you might actually receive a lot more. I do know there was one chapter last spring that did a virtual 5K. And it was basically a bunch of walking, which I can get with Coral and get you guys the information too. But it was literally all online. It was about how many steps you could do. You signed into an app, you donated money to it, and then the app tracks your steps based off your iPhone or whatever you're linked into. I was on a team for that, and I was averaging 20,000 steps a day. My normal steps a day is 3,000. So it motivated me to walk for a week. I took a few calls even on Zoom while walking my neighborhood at 9 p.m. at night. But, you know, there's definitely ways that you can fundraise virtually. You just got to think outside the box. And even another way that is a possibility is, what if you were to find a way to do online coupon books with like maybe some of the local restaurants or businesses that might be struggling right now? And maybe you could reach out to the restaurants and be like, hey, to drive traffic to your restaurant, will you do a certificate of 50% off for our coupon book for that? And then you can sell the coupon books for $20, but there might be $100 value in there. So there's definitely lots of options out there. You just got to think outside the box. And that's the one thing that COVID is definitely, whether you like it or not, we're going that way. So, but you know, there's plenty. I actually think there could be a lot more, especially for the universities that aren't in big cities, ways to fundraise virtually that they did not have possible before. So, but all right, no other questions on fundraising. I think we definitely threw out some good ideas here, and definitely love the face mask, because I think that's a good way to start. So moving on to the next slide. All right, Nicola.
Somehow you got stuck with all the fun topics, and I got all the compliance topics.
Well, hey, I said all I cared about is I wanted to talk fundraising. You said, okay.
Well, moving on to the accounting controls, which for chapters, I think it's one of the key topics. So if you're a new officer that's coming into a finance role, or an officer that's transitioning, try to provide guidance in some of these best practices. So as a chapter, you should not have more than $25 in cash on hand. I know sometimes in pre-COVID, it was a little tricky when you have members come in with cash and you walk around with hundreds of dollars for a night. What we recommend usually with that is the first thing in the morning, the following day when your bank opens up, go in and deposit that amount, so that way the money is not lingering around in your notebooks, your binders, your backpacks, wherever you keep all of your records. And that goes hand in hand with keeping a subledger of all of the money that comes in. So some chapters utilize Excel spreadsheets to keep track of their member income and member dues, and then any money that came in and went out. Other chapters use free software for the chapters. So if you have a bunch of accounting students in your chapter, see if they are really good with utilizing software for accounting and be able to keep your books for you. You also want to separate your financial duties. So when I was a student member, we always thought that the treasurer did everything finance related. And you actually don't want to have that. You want to have somebody who does one portion of the finance. So for example, here we have an officer that approves spending would be a different individual than the person who actually withdraws the money. That way you have two individuals are completing the task, but they create that separation of duties, so one person can't just do everything at once. And that also prevents any kind of money laundering or money loss from the chapter. Never use a personal account. So as a student member, you should never mix your personal finances with your chapter finances. You want to keep those as separate from each other as possible. And that just, you want to create that clear line, dividing line between your personal and between chapter. I know sometimes people are running late and, for quick and easy, you want to just deposit everything into your personal account and then you say, I'll transfer it later. Do not do that. Just keep them separately from your personal and your chapter finances. There's in the tools and references, I think that's going to be a slide that's coming up. There's actually best practices for debit cards. So definitely go into the resources for treasurer and finance and read over. But you wanna, and that pretty much specifies how your chapter should use the debit cards for your chapter if you do have them, instead of writing out checks and things like that. And that, going back, I think some of these bullet points I've already covered. So it's going back to making sure that you record your transactions right away. So that's like, if you have cash on hand, you want to deposit it right immediately to the bank. If you were collecting your dues at night, do it the following morning. Or we have some chapters who have their chapter meetings on Wednesdays at noon, because that's when there's like a free college hour. Banks are still open after 1 o'clock, so definitely right after your chapter meeting, before COVID, definitely go into the bank and deposit any money that you brought in. You also want to retain records for 3 to 6 years, and that's most of that is to be compliant with the IRS. Because we are a non-for-profit, we do have to follow the non-for-profit regulations, and part of that, the IRS has, if they feel like they can come in and audit any chapter at any time, just to confirm that things are actually non-for-profit and you're operating your chapter correctly. The other item, which we had a couple weeks ago at our finance session, the previous one, where we had an in-depth conversation on Venmo. So Venmo, PayPal, any other quick app, Zelle, if you want to consider that, those are not a great way to utilize to collect chapter dues, because there's not a way to separate a chapter funds from your personal funds, because all of these applications like Venmo, they have to be connected to a person. They're not connected to your chapter funds. So by utilizing Venmo and Zelle or PayPal for collecting dues, you're actually allowing a brother to collect the dues on chapter's behalf, and that creates a risk for your chapter, and you don't want to do that. So right now, being it in COVID, it might be tempting to use Venmo and Zelle to pay your dues, but I think we have a couple options that we'll mention later on that kind of go around that route, and you're either able to pay directly to Heritage Center with your dues, or send in payments via check to Heritage Center, and they're looking for a single payment from the entire chapter, but I believe they are making an exception if student members want to pay individually. They're able to do that as well. Is that right, Deanna?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then lastly, this comes in terms of transitioning your chapter officers. So a lot of chapters transition from springtime, and a lot of times your financial records either get misplaced over summer, or the prior officer takes the records with them. So we definitely encourage to have your chapter advisor be listed on your bank accounts, because that will encourage an individual or ensure that there is an individual who's able to go into the account and be the administrator if you can't locate a student after graduation, or for example, if you've never had to change a PIN or address on your account with your bank, and you can't locate that alumni to actually bring them back into campus because they're across the country and they can't easily come in, having a chapter advisor on the account will prevent any kind of lockouts from your bank, and able to have that another safety net to make sure that your bank account is accessible and able to manage it, even when you have alumni that graduate and move across country. Do we have any questions on best practices?
Not in the chat box.
Okay. And then on the other side of that, for chapter audits, so there is a chapter audit manual in AKSI resources, and a lot of times when people think an audit, they think a SEC financial company report. The chapter audit is pretty much making sure that your chapter is operating correctly. So there's a list of about 10 items, and you just go through it and make sure that you're following the best practices, you are implementing methods to alleviate any kind of funds mismanagement or chapter money loss. So with the audit, you want to have a committee of 4 to 5 people, and it is should not be the person who is currently handling the books. So a lot of times the current treasurer, for example, is the chair. You don't want to do that because you're actually auditing and reviewing their work to make sure everything is sound financially. So you want to have other members of the chapter participate in the audit. And you're pretty much reviewing everything from the income to the expense of your chapter financial records, and making sure that the receipts you have match the ledger, match the bank account. So this is a great opportunity for individuals who are interested in being accountants, and that's something they want to pursue. Definitely tap that brother on the shoulder and say, can you be part of the audit committee to help us review that, the books. And there's chapters who actually request, so I'm looking at the last bullet here. There are chapters who request alumni to come in and do an actual yearly audit with them. And this also applies with if you have a faculty that your chapter is close with, or if you have a faculty member that was initiated that does accounting, you could bring them in to help you with the yearly audit. The thing with the yearly audit, and there's also, I think, a couple, just like the budget, they should be all submitted into Chapter Spot. So work with your chapter advisor and your regional management team to see exactly where those should be placed. But you want to keep that yearly record of all the money that came in and out, and all the audits that have been completed somewhere in a permanent location. And for us, that is Chapter Spot, because as members graduate, student members beyond you, years after you, are able to go back and look at the records in the Chapter Spot.
Just one quick thing before we go to the next slide that I want to touch on here is definitely pay attention to your chapter's financials. I know on here it says check for discrepancies of fraud. You'd be surprised with how often that does happen, to where funds magically disappear. And you don't believe that it could happen to your chapter, but it happens. So you want to be careful of that. Sometimes it could be just a simple error. Sometimes it could be well, it shouldn't be an issue. I'll borrow and pay back. So, and just to touch on some of the stuff I'm seeing in the chat on here, one of the questions that came through was who can you work with regarding an audit? And it's reach out to Dina or your chapter educational resource coordinator, and they can definitely assist you with that. And Brian put all their email addresses in the chat for you, as well as his. And then another question I see that just popped up. Can you quickly explain again the reasons for not using Venmo? And it kind of goes back to discrepancies or fraud, because when you set up your Venmo, it's set up as a personal, not a chapter. So therefore, if I was to collect your money, it Venmos to me, and I can't really pass it off to anyone, and it's easy for money to accidentally get deposited in my personal accounts. And being that I'm the only one that might know that money came into me, because trust me, the brother that pays it might not realize it or follow up on it to make sure it makes it to the right account. They'll just assume it does. If I have financial issues, I might just say, I'm going to borrow it, I'll pay it back. And the next thing you know, I forget. And next thing you know, I borrowed $10,000 from the chapter on accident. So that's kind of the reasoning behind not using the Venmo. It's just easy, it's tough to track, it's tough to do the audits on, because it's really set up as a personal, not necessarily as a business even. So anything you want to add on that part, Brian, or do you think I covered it pretty well?
No, you shouldn't commingle your chapter funds with your personal funds. That's the bottom line right there.
Commingling also is a very no word on the terms of IRS, and the IRS we do not want on our bad side. So, all right, moving on to the next slide. Resources. So here are some definite resources for you. We have different budget templates, and these are all links on there that you'd be able to use, which will be making sure you get a copy of these slides who are in here tonight. So you can make payments for events, dues, memberships, and general chapter payments through this link. Budget templates. A lot of you like to create your own budget, but why create the wheel when we already have one for you so that you can adapt to you. In the finance breakdown, you can also get different templates to allow you more detailed layout of your chapter financial plannings. Don't recreate the wheel and spend hours on that when we have a lot of information for you. Finance manuals, you got an audit manual to help you with that. Operations avenues, finance episodes, and fundraising episode to help give you ideas. Treasurer YouTube playlists, officer development on YouTube. And then one other thing I don't think we touched too much, but you can also make payments through Chapter Spot. So Dina or Brian, if you can remind me, what is it called again? I forgot the name of it off the top of my head.
The payment gateway, Stripe.
Stripe. So Stripe, you can make payments for. The one thing just to touch on it, because I've seen chapters have issues with this. So you have Stripe, you link it to your account. So the brothers pay, and it automatically goes into your chapter account. If you change your accounts for whatever reason, make sure you update Stripe with the right account. Or when your brothers make payments, all the money's going into an old account, and there's a chance that every brother in your chapter doesn't know there's an old account attached to it. And next thing you know, you have $10,000 owed while most of the money's in the old account. So, and yes, I've learned that from personal experience. But Stripe's one way that you can actually have brothers make the payments all electronic, and you don't have to worry much about it. All gets billed through Chapter Spot. So, any questions on any of this stuff?
And one thing to note is just that Stripe account is not connected to the Heritage Center. So those two systems are not linked. So if you want to make those payments, we will not see it. So a lot of chapters think that, oh, I made a payment and well, did you receive it? No, we will not. Those systems are not linked.
It's basically an intermediary to collect the payment to put it in the chapter's account. It's still the chapter's responsibility to pay the bills with the Heritage Center based off what their invoices are. It doesn't automatically send the payments to us. It's just kind of like Chapter Spot's version of Venmo, connecting it so that it's not commingling and gives you guys an option. So,
But it does cost money, right? I think that's the only reason chapters have opted out from using it, is because there is per transaction fee.
Yeah, that's going to be true with any credit card processor. Those go straight to Stripe, not to the fraternity or to Chapter Spot. And I just want to point out that it's always, if you have questions, just ask. You've got your chapter advisor, you've got your regional director, you've got the fraternity staff. Your question is most likely not going to be new. We've seen most situations before and have a lot of resources to provide you. Tim already talked about don't recreate the wheel. Work smarter, not harder, right? Right, Tim?
it's the way I live my life. So, but definitely, and it's like, you have plenty of resources, and if you don't ask us, we can't help you because we might not know you have that question. So, like Brian just said, trust me, there's very few questions that get asked that we have not heard before. So, and if you haven't heard it, we'd love to learn new questions and try to learn from it too. So, there's no other questions. Just go to the next slide, and we'll let Nikolai handle this slide.
Thank you.
See, I gave you a fun slide.
Thanks.
So that's it for today. If you guys have any questions, please ask. We're here. We want to support you. We want to help you. Realistically, with your positions, your position is probably the most important position in the chapter, because your chapter will either thrive or struggle based off your success. Chapters struggle if they're not financially secure, and the chapters that are financially secure, they're soaring and the sky's the limits. So, it's up to you.
Yeah, and regarding the questions about the, sorry, Dina, regarding the questions about the dues structure for the year, expect the communication to be sent out Friday. We're finalizing some things and then we'll get the information out. So if you don't receive that, let us know.
And then if I could just have one final, add that when you receive your invoices and credit memos, please take a look at those and review those. And then when you receive your monthly statement, use those to reconcile. So print those out or save those in your electronic file so that you can take those invoices and credit memos and reconcile to your monthly statement is really important. So just don't disregard those emails that come to you. It's really important to review those. If they're dues or pledges, that those numbers that we're sending to you are accurate. So open it up, take a look at it, make sure that it's all accurate. If it's not, reach out to either myself or your resource coordinator, and then we'll go from there, especially on the credit memo. So then if you have questions on that, how is it getting applied? We can walk you through all that. If you need ledgers to know what your balance is, any of your financial information regarding your chapter, I'm here to help, your resource coordinator, and we'll get that information to you as well.
Nikolai, you have any parting words?
I think for me, when I was a treasurer, one of the things that stuck out was that even though you're doing financial activities for your chapter, chapter finances are not the responsibility of just the CFO or the treasurer. It involves your president, it involves your chair of membership, because all of those, so how you report your chapter members are all linked back to your finances. How you communicate, the chapter secretary is supposed to be sending out minutes, and your financial standing should be presented in those minutes. So as a chapter treasurer, chapter CFO, all the information that you see and deal with on a daily basis actually bounces off other chapter officers. So that way Even though you might be handling all the chapter finances, you're actually working closely with your other chapter officers. So it's, when we think it's a one-person role, it's really a whole executive board responsibility for the operations of the chapter.
Thank you. And there was a question that came through the chat. Are the membership dues decided at our own discretion for our chapter? Brian answered that your chapter should vote on the budget, which includes the amount you set at your local dues. And I also just want to clarify that's at the local dues. You don't set the budget for what the fraternity charges for their dues, but your dues should be ahead of whatever we charge. Now, as Brian mentioned, they're looking at a possible 10% reduction. More information will come out on Friday on that. But as far as your local dues, you guys do set whatever those dues end up being, and you set your budget for the semester as a chapter. All right. Any other questions? If not, then we can give everyone their Wednesday night back.
Well, thank you. I took a lot of notes, clearly, but I just want to say thank you guys for the tips, and I'm hoping that we have a good semester this year.
You guys,
it's gonna be a tough year for sure. Just keep a positive attitude. You know, things may not go your way or our way, and we'll figure it out as we go along, like we have been since March. So good luck, everybody, and keep a positive attitude, and let us know how we can help.
Yes.
Sorry, I have one more question.
Yeah.
For any other, CFOs in the chapter, local chapter, does anybody have like a number that they have in mind? I just want to, get a reference for what other chapters are doing as local dues. Do you guys have any numbers that you guys have in mind?
I'm a part of the Sigma Omega chapter at FAU, and our chapter isn't really as big. We're currently supposed to be having around 20 active members this semester because we weren't able to bring in a spring line last semester, but we're supposed to this semester. We've decided to do like $105 just because we know times are tough and people are already kind of not satisfied that things will be virtual. So some people feel like, what's the point? So in order to satisfy both the bank account and the members, we decided to do $105.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
Yeah, Steve, I've seen chapters charge anywhere from $150 a term to $500. It just depends on the program that they're offering, the size of the chapter, and what the local members really, are interested in doing with the chapter. So it does vary greatly.
Yeah, because my chapter usually was around 155 at first, 135 for early dues, and then we did 180 for regular dues after a certain amount of date for us. That was how it was before COVID, but now we do 105. So it's really just depends on how big or small your chapter is and how everybody feels on how much money they would like to give during this time.
Yeah, because our chapter has 55 on a Mega Kappa chapter for Towson. And I was thinking about maybe like, because previously it was like close to 150, and I was thinking maybe like previously set it down to 84. But then I don't know if that's too, or if it's like not a good number set for my local chapter. That's why I kind of wanted to see where everybody else numbers were.
really depends on your chapter, so talk to them, try to fill them out. The most important thing you want to be cautious of is try not to go below what else would be due for the dues that you'd be sending up for the fraternity for the semester, because if so, you're putting yourself in the red. But at the same point, if you have money available saved up potentially, then you might be able to cushion it, but you got to be very cautious of going too low, because if you're basically, it's almost like if you have a house and you're paying your mortgage but you're not collecting enough rent, you're always paying money out when you should be making money to a point. So you just got to be very cautious of that.
Yeah, because 84 is honestly, in my opinion, maybe a little too low, because realistically, with us with 105, if dues were still around 50 instead of what it is now with maybe a 10%, so maybe it being 54, and the 27, it's still like only $20 about per member that we're bringing in. And even though we're smaller and yeah, you have 50 plus, it still might not be good enough for y'all, because y'all will have to have a bigger budget because it is more of y'all and y'all school is bigger. So maybe at least 100 might be good for y'all in terms of that, because you also just have to think about how much you will have to give towards the fraternity as a whole.
And the one other thing just to point out on that one too, Sierra, how big is your chapter, Sierra?
My chapter right now is at 20.
So you guys are at 20, and if you're making $20 after based off the $100 in dues, you also have to pay the $250 a semester for the convention savings plan. But because you have 20 members, that works out. If you had less than 10 members, that wouldn't necessarily work out either.
Yeah, and we're also supposed to be bringing in the spring line from last semester as well in the beginning. And thanks to the person who asked earlier in the chat saying about the people you bring in for spring, if they had to pay for member dues or not, because that answered a question I had. So that's still kind of like some money coming in there as well that was supposed to be for last semester.
Yeah. So hope that answered you, Steve. And Brian, did you have anything else you wanted to add? No?
Hey, Steve, do you have a chapter budget? Because that will give you the answer on how much you should be charging your members, because you have to take into account all the other Heritage Center related expenses, and then all your income, and that will help you figure out dividing whatever the number is at the end by the number of students.
Yeah, because I did my chapter budget, and I put the expenses out the way with the membership fees, the pledge fees and everything. With what you guys are going to be sending, I definitely have to update. And with the budget that we had, because obviously with COVID coming in this spring, for all the leaders that had their own budget, not everything was used up. So of course we saved on that. So that's why I just wanted to see, with COVID now, mostly everything's going to be virtual. Will it be better to lower a lot of the local dues, attract more of the members to, continue staying? Because, I think Sierra mentioned, also had to accommodate both parties in a way where they know that they're still virtual, are they still going to be able to pay it, even though they're just sitting at their computer and not, doing a lot of in-persons. So that's why I kind of wanted to check in.
I also wanted to say too, though, like that's something that my chapter is trying to do now. We actually are going to reach out to all the brothers who were active last semester and call them and like just do a mental check-in. And like we're trying to get a good estimate of how many brothers even plan on coming back next semester, because like, we were trying to decide on how much we wanted dues to be. So, if we get a good idea of, okay, this is how many brothers we think we're going to have. And then, we can get an idea of, well, I feel like all the brothers in our chapter, we know who pays their dues. Like we can look at who's done payment plans in the past, or, who's been late or behind, and people who actually want to be in the chapter. Because I honestly say we also have brothers, that pay their dues, they want to be here. And you also have those brothers who, are in the chapter and maybe they don't do anything, but they're complaining about how much, the dues are. So I just still say too, and then with us having to do everything virtually, I feel like with us having to pay the insurance and the dues, like at least 100, like Sierra was saying, I think that's kind of a good idea, so we can still have money like going towards the chapter for us to be able to do all these virtual events. And I just feel like stuff like this, it may take more money than usual to even keep the chapter going as it was before, as we could use the resources on campus, you know, because the campus was open and we could do stuff here and there. So I just feel like $100, I feel, because our chapter is about as big as Sierra's, I think that $100 would be pretty good.
I also would like to say, I didn't think about it till now, Shania, you actually helped refresh my memory that for fundraising idea, what we do for my chapter, we have a thing called like a phone-a-thon for the alumni. So active members will, it'll sometimes be like once a week or once every 2 weeks, we will call alumni, ask how they're doing and certain things, and then also ask for them to donate money to the chapter. So that's another way to have like a fundraising idea during this, you know, virtual time.
All right. Well, I think that's a wrap, everybody.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. We appreciate it, and we look forward to a successful fall semester during uncertain times. And if you ever need any help, your local regional management team, regional directors, we're all here for you, and we'll support you the best we can. Just know we might not have all the answers, but we'll try to find them for you.